Hello, I'm Sebastian. Welcome to 9R Trees podcast. Today, I will summarize and review the book. In The Death of the Banker, acclaimed biographer and financial historian Chernow examines how the modern idea of the banker evolved from commanding, family-run powerhouses into a more fragmented, competitive, and investor-driven marketplace. The book traces the rise of towering financial dynasties that once shaped national policy, underwrote industrial expansion, and dominated access to capital. It then explores the forces that eroded their influence, including shifting regulation, market democratization, technological change, and the growing sophistication of individual investors. Rather than treating finance as a closed elite club, Chernow presents it as a living ecosystem that responds to politics, innovation, and public trust. The narrative connects boardroom strategy with broader cultural attitudes about wealth, risk, and accountability. Readers come away with a clearer sense of why the iconic banker figure faded, what replaced it, and how ordinary participants gained leverage in markets that once seemed inaccessible. The result is a historically grounded lens on the ongoing redistribution of financial power. I will give you key takeaways from this book. Firstly, the age of financial dynasties and their grip on capital. A central topic is the historical period when a handful of banking families and partnership firms acted as gatekeepers to capital. Chernow highlights how these institutions built trust and dominance through relationships, reputation, and the ability to mobilize vast sums for governments, railroads, and industrial giants. In this world, finance was intensely personal. Partnerships put their own fortunes and names at risk, and the social standing of the principals served as an informal form of oversight. This structure made banks powerful intermediaries between savers and enterprise, but it also concentrated decision-making in a narrow circle. The dynastic model thrived because information traveled slowly, markets were less transparent, and underwriting required networks that could not easily be replicated by outsiders. The book shows how these bankers shaped not only deals, but also economic narratives, influencing what counted as sound enterprise and who deserved funding. At the same time, the concentration of power created vulnerabilities, elite consensus could exclude innovation, conflicts of interest could be normalized, and public backlash could build when financial influence seemed to outrun democratic accountability. Understanding this era clarifies why the banker once appeared indispensable and why the eventual decline felt so dramatic. Secondly, regulation, politics, and the gradual constriction of old power. Another important theme is how political scrutiny and regulation steadily curtailed the dominance of great banking houses. As economies industrialized and crises exposed systemic fragility, governments and the public demanded clearer rules, stronger disclosure, and limits on concentrated influence. Chernow's perspective emphasizes that regulation did not arrive as a single decisive blow. It accumulated across decades through reforms, investigative commissions, and changing attitudes toward monopolistic control. Rules governing securities issuance, banking practices, and market conduct reduced the comparative advantage of elite relationships by making transactions more standardized and transparent. The book also explores how bankers were forced to operate in a landscape where policymakers sought to prevent conflicts of interest and reduce the ability of a few firms to steer national financial life. This shift changed the incentives of institutions. Rather than relying on social prestige, banks increasingly relied on scale, compliance infrastructure, and product innovation. The transformation was also cultural, as bankers became less mythic figures and more regulated service providers. By tracing these currents, the narrative helps readers see regulation as a key mechanism behind the decline of dynastic finance, while also illustrating the trade-offs between stability, innovation, and market freedom. Thirdly, from partnerships to corporations, the new risk culture on Wall Street, Chernow examines how the move from privately held partnerships to publicly owned financial corporations reshaped behavior and accountability. In the older partnership model, senior bankers faced direct personal consequences for losses, which encouraged cautious underwriting and long-term reputation management. As institutions incorporated, expanded, and tapped public shareholders, the relationship between decision-makers and risk shifted. Compensation systems, quarterly performance pressure, and competitive deal-making could reward short-term gains while distributing downside risk across shareholders, employees, and, in some cases, the broader financial system. This corporate evolution also fostered consolidation and the emergence of large, multi-line financial firms that blurred boundaries between commercial banking, investment banking, trading, and asset management. The book treats these changes as a structural reason. The iconic banker persona faded, the individual gave way to committees, models, and sprawling organizations. Readers can track how scale and complexity created both new capabilities and new fragilities, especially when innovation outpaced oversight. This topic is less about demonizing finance and more about understanding how incentives changed as institutions professionalized and industrialized. The result is a clearer picture of why modern finance feels less personal and why reputation alone no longer disciplines risk. Fourthly, market democratization and the rise of the small investor. A major emphasis is the growing power of the small investor and the institutions that enabled broader participation in markets. Chernow frames this as a long transition from an era when access to information and instruments was tightly controlled to one where individuals could invest through mutual funds, retirement accounts, discount brokerages, and later digital platforms. As savings shifted into pooled vehicles and indexed products, decision-making influence moved away from a few private banking partners toward millions of households and professional asset managers acting on their behalf. The book explores how disclosure rules, financial journalism, and wider financial education contributed to this change, making it harder for elite firms to operate behind closed doors. Importantly, democratization is not portrayed as purely liberating. It also introduces new risks, such as speculative manias, overconfidence, and vulnerability to misleading narratives. Still, the net effect is a redistribution of power. Capital markets become less dependent on a small circle of underwriters and more responsive to dispersed investors and their preferences. This topic helps readers see how ordinary people gained leverage indirectly through the growth of collective investment structures, and why the modern financial system increasingly competes for retail trust rather than merely elite approval. Lastly, legacy, lessons, and what replaces the great banker. The book also focuses on what remains after the decline of the old dynasties, a financial world where influence is dispersed among large institutions, regulators, asset managers, and increasingly data-driven systems. Chernow's approach encourages readers to ask what society lost and gained. The decline of dynastic bankers reduced the visibility of individual power brokers, but it did not eliminate concentration. It changed its form. Power can now reside in massive balance sheets, global networks, and the ability to process information at scale. This topic draws out lessons about trust and legitimacy. The old system depended on personal credibility, while the new system depends on governance, transparency, and consistent rules. It also invites reflection on cycles of innovation and backlash, showing how each generation redefines what counts as responsible finance. For readers, the practical takeaway is a framework for evaluating institutions and incentives rather than personalities. Instead of looking for heroic or villainous bankers, the book points toward understanding structures, who bears risk, who captures reward, and how information flows. This lens remains valuable for interpreting recurring financial headlines, from consolidation and crises to the changing role of intermediaries in an era of passive investing and fintech. In conclusion, this book suits readers who enjoy financial history with a strong narrative drive, including investors, business students, policy-minded professionals, and anyone curious about how Wall Street's culture shifted over time. It is also a good fit for small investors who want context for why markets now feel more accessible, yet more complex, than in the era of private banking dynasties. The benefit is perspective. By tracing the decline of old financial houses and the changing incentives behind modern institutions, readers can better judge risk, understand why regulation matters, and recognize how power moves through markets even when no single banker seems to be in charge. That broader understanding can improve real-life decisions, from choosing investment vehicles to interpreting financial news without being swept up by personality-driven stories. Compared with similar books that focus narrowly on one crash or one firm, Chernow's historical sweep offers a longer arc that connects personalities, policy, and structural change. The value proposition is its ability to explain not just what happened, but why the financial system evolved toward corporate scale and mass participation. If you want a rigorous, readable map of how the small investor came to matter, it is worth buying. If you would like to support Ron Chernow, you can buy the book through the Amazon link I've provided in the podcast description. After reading the book, please let me know what you think and share your thoughts. See you around.